So for the 5-part plan, we can go to YouTube. Just come out of this a minute. And if you search how to write a good essay, it's the first one that comes up. So here we can see our friend who will talk you through how to use the 5-part plan. Just skip the ads that come up inevitably. And it's about half the video. It's not all of it. He goes on to talk about how to use quotations. You don't need to worry about that. But just remind yourself on the structure for the 5-part plan. You want to use that for the big essay questions, which we'll come to. Okay, so let's go back to the PowerPoint. Time management, we said number of marks plus a quarter of the marks will give you an idea of how long to take on that question. And how to answer the question, let's have a look at the top tips as we go through. You have those in your books as well, so you look at those top tips on how to get your technique right for each of the questions. So www.paf, you must do this for every source that comes up before you answer a question on it. This helps you to place the source in context, to understand the essential features of the source, and these aspects come into your answer and will give you more marks when they're relevant and you talk about them. Who produced it, first of all, first W. When was it produced? Put it in a chronological context so you can understand where it fits into your understanding of the history that is being asked about. What is the topic? So make sure you're clear on what the source is talking about. The purpose, first of all, why was it created? We'll look at some examples. Audience, who was it created for? Think about how all of these things will affect different aspects of the source, reliability, usefulness, etc. And format, what type of a source is it? What are some of the issues with these kinds of sources? And I think it's good that we do an example, so we'll come back to that. Now, actually, before we go on to Peel, you have a really useful tool in Google Images. So let's just go to Google Images, and you can search any source. So let's search Cold War cartoons, and there's so many that come up. Now, you can click on any of them, and you can just work your way through the www.paf of the source, and that really helps you to practice identifying these 6 aspects of every source, and then go on to the next one. And you want to try and do it in a minute, not more than a minute or so for each source. So time yourself. This is really good practice for the exams. Expose yourself to lots of sources so you can really practice identifying the different aspects of the source, like who created it, when was it created, what is the topic, P, purpose, A, audience, F, format. And this way you'll get quicker at identifying these things, and this will help you to do it quickly in the exam. And if you want to check something, you're not sure if you've got that right, normally, I don't know if it'll be true in this case, well, yes it is, when we visit the website we can see the context and will explain the source. So that's also a nice way to check that you're doing your www.paf correctly, and it's a good way to revise. So that's just something that you can remember and practice. Okay, back to the PowerPoint. So the next thing is Peel. Now you really should use Peel for all of your paragraphs, every single one, because it just means that your answer is so much more focused on the question. It's got all the key elements of the best answers. So when you're using Peel, you start by making a point in directly addressing the question. So your point should use the question terminology. For example, how useful is this source in studying superpower relations in the Cold War? If that's the question, your point will use that question, and you'll say, change it to a statement. So something like, this source is useful in studying superpower relations in the Cold War because, make a brief point. Peel reminds you to use evidence from the source, use evidence from your own knowledge to support your point. Explain that evidence, explain your point, and then link back to the question at the end of the paragraph. That keeps a sustained focus on the question, and it can also help you to remember the question that you're answering, just to remind yourself, because you have to remind yourself as you're writing every couple of sentences, what is the question? Am I actually answering the question? Reread the question every couple of sentences to make sure that you're focused. This is the biggest mistake students make, is not answering the question. By rereading the question every couple of sentences, you can check that you are on track. And maybe it's inevitable that from time to time you might deviate. You've given some evidence, but then you think, well, what is this to do with? Check the question and then give that explanation that relates that evidence back to the question. The link at the end of the paragraph can also link onto the next paragraph if there is another one. It's a nice way to help your writing to flow. And once again, if you do want to get some practice on Peel, YouTube is really great for this. So many online tutorials here. If we just search Peel paragraph structure, something like this, there's some great videos. This is a pretty good one on how to write Peel paragraphs. It explains different aspects. Okay, back to the PowerPoint. How to analyze picture sources in your exam. So picture just as a reminder of different things to look out for, because when it comes to picture sources, it's all about the detail. And picture reminds you, when you use this as a mental checklist, you don't have to actually write it out in the exam, you don't really have time for that, but just a mental checklist. First of all, people. Who are the people in the picture source? In this case, we've got Khrushchev, obviously, and Fidel Castro. Items and objects are important, so we can see the missiles in Castro's teeth are represented as missiles, so that will help us to think about the meaning. Captions, any captions that appear, well, there's a phrase that Khrushchev is saying, "This hurts me more than it hurts you." So again, this is all essential for piecing the meaning together. It's like a jigsaw. Each one of these brings a bit more meaning to the source. T, things in the background are important if there are things in the background, but they aren't always, as in this case. That's fine, but sometimes sources have crucial details in the background that you have to take account of. The underlying attitude of the artist. What is he or she trying to say? Praising or criticizing. R is remember what you know about the topic. So this is where you bring in your contextual knowledge. Well, I know about the Cuban Missile Crisis, I know the year that it took place, and I know the people that were involved, and yes, now I'm remembering the story around it, and that helps me to see what is being said in this source. And E, explain what is happening in the picture. Only when you've done the first PICTUR can you do E, because only when you've done this first 6 can you really explain what is happening in the picture, because you've taken into account all of the details which help you to uncover the meaning on a deep level. Now, it's really important to point out that the AQA mark scheme uses these criteria in their assessment objectives with explanations. It's basic, simple, developed, and complex. And you want to be consistently getting into developed and pushing onto complex to get the top grades. So, what caused the Titanic disaster in 1912? Let's consider this question as an example. So a basic explanation would just identify one reason, and it's not explained. The Titanic sunk because it hit an iceberg and there were not enough lifeboats on board. So clearly that's basic, and it's not going to get more than 2 out of 8. Simple explanation, 3 to 4 marks. The Titanic disaster was caused by an iceberg a few hundred miles off the coast of Newfoundland. This ship was on its maiden voyage from Southampton to New York City when it collided with the iceberg at about 11:40 on the 14th of April 1912. In part, the disaster was caused by the captain, who had ordered the crew to open up the engine so they could prove how fast she was. So it's quite detailed, but it's only giving one reason. It has times and dates, but again, there's just one reason given for what caused the disaster, and that's still just the iceberg, so it's still a simple explanation. What we want is developed and complex. So developed, we see straight away it's identifying a number of causes. The collision with the iceberg was obviously a significant factor. However, the captain's decision to attempt to set a new record across the Atlantic was clearly a contributory factor. Added to this, on the evening of the collision, sea conditions were exceptionally calm, and this made it difficult for the lookout to spot the telltale chop of waves hitting the bergs. Finally, at 2224 souls with 2,224 souls on board and lifeboats for less than 1,000, this oversight also contributed to the disaster. So a number of causes, reasons given, as well as explanation for those reasons. And this is where you have to make sure that you give detailed explanations. Often one sentence is not really enough to show the examiner your understanding. Reread it and check, is it clear? Do I need to offer more explanation? Normally elaborating is going to help you if it's clear and it's focused on the question. Providing a couple more sentences of explanation is really going to help push you into develop, and hopefully complex. So complex, we can see an example there of what a complex answer would look like. It's giving a range of reasons, but it's also categorized those reasons as social, economic, and political factors, and it goes through quite some detail. Now, you might not necessarily agree with this specific example of what caused the Titanic disaster in 1912, but that's not really the point. The point is just to show you the different types of answers, ranging from basic one reason, no explanation, to simple, still one reason, some explanation, to developed, a number of reasons and clear explanation, to complex, a number of categorized reasons and very clear detailed explanation. This is what you want to aim for. If you want, you can pause the video at this stage and read the complex example. Okay, then there's just a bit more detail on the language used in AQA's assessment criteria for basic, simple, developed, and complex. So developed, at least two reasons well explained. Complex, at least two reasons linked to the explanation. So that brings us to the first part of paper 1. So remember, it's 1 hour 45 minutes, 84 marks, and 4 for spelling and grammar, so about 5%. The two parts is Germany 1890 to 1945, which we're going to look at now, as well as conflict and tension between East and West 1945 to 1972.